seeing this nice poster presentation. Stake is high right now. I think we're well prepared, and I hope that you enjoy our panel discussion today. We have different expertise here. Some of us like iced tea, some of us lemonade, and some others water. But aside that, we are here to talk about online learning, which keeps coming to our educational system all through from elementary to secondary to higher education. Our presenters today have been reading about impact of online learning in educational settings at different levels. On my right, Mr. Jerry Tate is Assistant Principal of Instruction at Cookie STEM Academy, Detroit Public Schools Community Districts. And next is Mr. Tim Constant, who is a Manager of Educational Outreach of the Holocaust Memorial Center and a Research Associate at the University of Michigan Dearborn. He's going to talk about online learning at the secondary level after Jerry covers elementary level. And then our last presenter today is John Saroros, who comes from University of Michigan Medical School. He's the Director of Commercialization Education at the medical school. As the title of our presentation highlights, we are going to focus on three different but interrelated topics when it comes to how online teaching and learning are impacting our education practices. The first issue that we will cover is how the curriculum is impacted by such online presence. And secondly, we will cover how instruction is changing. And finally, we will cover how leadership practices are changing when more and more online learning comes to our way. After that, our panelists will share their conclusion about the discussions that we will have today. And finally, you will have question and answer sessions after the presentations. So the first topic of the discussion is how online learning impacted the curriculum decisions. Again, we will start at the elementary level, move to the secondary level, and then have a discussion at higher education level. Jerry?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerry Tate, and I'm here to discuss how curriculum is impacted at the elementary level. I welcome you this evening. As we all know, that online learning is sweeping across America. There's been a big push for it, and there's a big focus on assessment. And in my district, Detroit Public Schools Community District, we're looking at assessing children with our assessment on iReady. We've been reviewing reading and math scores, and also just trying to impact achievement, student achievement. For the most part, we do have several students, or a multitude of students that are being homeschooled. It's an explosion of homeschool explosion has impacted curriculum. Just to share some data, I know that during my readings that I found out that as of 2000, the year 2000, 45,000 students in a K-12 educational setting have been looking at online learning. And I'm looking at blended learning as an environment which is on the rise. And pretty much students learn online all the time. We know that technology is a big piece, and pretty much they can do it part-time or full-time. Online learning offers some more personalized instructional piece, and I look at that as a guide, as an administrator, being a principal, assistant principal at the building. We have a multitude of learning that takes place. So, for number one, as an administrator, I think it's very important that you have to be tech savvy. And when it comes to training staff on how to implement online learning in regards to the curriculum, they have to have a mindset of studying so we have to get to this technology piece. And there's a global outreach support for content. I think that we continue to fully provide online learning for all students in the elementary setting. And as you hear our panelists today, you're going to hear from the elementary to the secondary and to the higher education view on how it impacts curriculum. And I'm going to also mention too that even at the elementary level, it is new, but there are some challenges, and we're going to continue to move forward with that. So that's it.
Thank you, Terry. Let me add to the conversation one or two critical pieces. The elementary level is a little kind of challenging level when it comes to online learning, because there is a quite I mean, the implications of educational technology to enhance the face-to-face teaching and learning. And some of those applications could be done online, so that online learning comes in a kind of little different form. So that's one kind of factor we should consider when we think about online learning and elementary level applications. So that educational technology versus online learning applications kind of blurry at elementary level. But what we are seeing in the literature is that definitely online assessment is an existing piece at the elementary level. And then homeschooling portion of the elementary level seems to utilize online learning much greater than the kids that typically attending school. So those are the kind of the factors that impact the curricular decisions at the elementary level. So the secondary level is somewhat different, and then Tim is going to cover the secondary level.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So secondary involves middle school and high school, and so the main impact that online learning has had at the secondary level is regarding access to curriculum. So, and the foundation of that comes from some legislation, some national legislation, like the Digital Promise in 2008 and Connect Ed, as well as the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. So Title 4A of that legislation focuses on mainly access to curriculum basing it on technology. So Michigan also has a focus on that. So they have an initiative called the Top 10 in 10 Years. And it's a strategic plan by the state of Michigan. And goal 1 of that strategic plan is focusing on all students having access to high quality education systems. So when I talk about that there's a major focus regarding curriculum and access at the secondary level, that's the kind of putting it in the context, that's the foundation of that. So in 2017, Dr. Donarski from the University of Michigan wrote an article talking about this and talked about the expansion of curriculum offerings that's offered by online education and secondary education. And in the state of Michigan, that's really impactful because there is first of all, there's a lack of teachers and there's a lack of content area specialists in particular subject areas. So we're going to bring up a map, and I want to show you the impact of this. So what you're looking at here is a map of the Holocaust Memorial Center's Education Outreach Program, which started April 27th of 2018. And this is current. This is very current. And what this shows is that the state of Michigan is very diverse with regards to population concentrations. So 28.2% of the student population in the state of Michigan is in Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne County. When you get out of that particular area, the majority of the intermediate school districts and the regional education authorities, they have less than 1% of the student population. So the areas where there's few dots or no dots are very remote areas. And what you will see is you will see more students that are in those areas that are taking advantage of virtual schools and online learning, like Connections Academy, Michigan Virtual Charter Academy, Michigan Virtual High School. So in our outreach, and we're traveling to these locations, when we get into some of these more remote areas, we're having more teachers from these virtual schools attending our professional development. So one of the things that the teachers have told us at the secondary level is that what they really like about the online learning component is not only the access for students, but also the ease of being able to revise curriculum in an online format. And also they mentioned a responsive curriculum. So what that means is they can respond to specific demographic changes or new technologies, or it provides them more flexibility. That's what they mean by that responsive curriculum. So at the secondary level, a lot of the foundation is regarding access and flexibility.
So thank you, Tim. It is really important to highlight again. So it's almost unbelievable that we have still rural areas with lack of schools and teachers and access to materials and etc. At the secondary level, online learning seems making great impact for this type of demographics. At the higher education level, the situation is somewhat different, and John is going to tell us about the impact of online learning on curriculum at the higher education level.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and as just mentioned, my research for this discussion was at the post-secondary level, primarily focused on two-year community colleges, four-year colleges and universities, both private and public, to kind of set some boundaries on the angle at which we're coming at this. And really, the research revealed three different trends in how online curriculums are developed at this level. The first of which subscribe to the social efficiency ideology, if you're familiar with it. Social efficiency ideology is basically where you recognize there is a need in the workforce, and so you would develop an educational curriculum to fill that need. So for example, if the state of Michigan needed more teachers, you would develop an online program that would generate more teachers. The second trend is kind of the opposite approach to that, and that's the learner-centered ideology, where really it's about providing more experience to the learner, where they can arrange their own learning based on what it is that they're working themselves through. It's more competency-based at their pace versus certain objectively driven curriculums. And then the third is this new and emerging area on a capitalistic ideology, with the idea that institutions are creating curriculum and generating programs or developing programs purely for revenue, or purely for profit. So regardless of, or irregardless of student interest or faculty interest, it's all about filling tuition and enrollment and generating that revenue for the institution.
Thank you, John. Our next question is going to focus on how we are teaching, which is instruction. The first, overall, what we are teaching goes into the curriculum, but how we are teaching is an instructional impact. So we are going to talk about how the instruction has been impacted by online offerings at the elementary level again, secondary level, and higher education level. Jerry?
As you all know, many states or large districts offer online public education for students. Families are turning to online elementary schools or enrichment programs to look for like remedial type of assessments for children. Students can enroll like in a full-time online course, offerings, supplement offerings, more than a brick and mortar type of thing. Proponents of elementary schools point out that there are many benefits. For the most part, students get instant feedback when they're online. And it also offers management systems, and self-paced learning is a big key for the elementary kids, allowing students to progress through many multitude of subjects. Families, for the most part, adhere to the federal and state educational standards when they are online. So there are some guidelines that have to be followed when students are online taking those classes. Just to say, in my current district, for the most part, there's a limited offerings that we're offering for online services for children. We are adopting a one-to-one laptop program. Currently, 25 schools have adopted this, but also I believe this coming year, there's going to be like 46 schools that will be getting initiative of getting the one-to-one laptops at a cost of $15 million that the superintendent is trying to push for. There's a focus mainly with me at the elementary level that educational technology is just used as a tool for the most part for kids. And we do offer after-school programming, face-to-face setting, virtual classrooms type of thing, and students are being challenged. Even sometimes special education students kind of geared towards using online programming. For the most part, online programming is independent, anywhere self-directed. There's a balance technology, face-to-face, schools grade one-on-one attention, as I mentioned before. So that's it.
Thank you, Jerry. Let me highlight a couple of points that you raised. I think student-centered instruction is becoming more prominent with the online tools available at the elementary level and online offerings as much as they exist. We also know that such technology use impacts self-directed learning, which you nicely addressed, engaging students with instruction, and also anytime, anywhere type of the opportunities for students. It kind of takes the bricks barrier out of the instruction. Thank you, Jerry. And the secondary level. Tim?
Yeah, so at the secondary level, it's really interesting. So for online instructional strategies and the effectiveness of those strategies really can be categorized into 4 different categories. So one is with regards to direct instruction. So you'll see that with your fully virtual schools like Michigan Virtual High School and Connections Academy. The second one would be of a supplemental or supportive function, so test prep and skills practice and virtual field trips. So you'll see online learning used in that regard. A third way is you'll see it used in alternative education and providing remediation. And then the fourth one, which is actually the largest of the categories, is credit recovery. So there is a research by a researcher by the name of Heppen in 2017 that did an extensive research on online credit recovery. And because it is the fastest growing area of online learning and the most common, and showed that students had a substantial difficulty with online learning for credit recovery specifically. There was lower engagement, lower levels of clarity with regards to the content, and the post-test scores actually decreased. I've had that experience in the past where we've used the old E2020, which is now referred to as Edgenuity, where we really saw a lot of problems with online learning for credit recovery, specifically for students that are trying to recover a credit in a particular class. So we actually moved to a more blended learning, and so now you're starting to see at a secondary level more of a blended learning model, because that research and the data with a blended learning model from secondary seems to be working really well. It's really working very well, especially with students that need remediation and that skills practice. So some of the advantages have already been talked about with regards to working at your own pace, and it's moving things from a teacher-centered to a more learner-centered model. But again, one of the disadvantages is not only with regards to the credit recovery, but it's also subject-specific as well. So there's research that shows that specific subjects, math and science specifically at the secondary level, the data shows lower post-test scores, shows lower engagement than if online learning is used for ELA or social sciences. So that's a really interesting finding that you will see at the secondary level.
That's really important to highlight, Tim. Did you see anything in the research? Why is that happening? Is it the content by itself difficult to offer online?
Yes.
Or other factors?
Yeah, the content, when someone is taking online credit recovery, the systems like Edgenuity, for example, which I mentioned, that is at grade level. So if somebody is taking an algebra class, that is algebra that's at grade level, there's no modifications. So it's very, very challenging for students that may struggle in math. So that's the reason why that, like a blended learning model would work better. The ELA's social sciences seems to have a little bit more flexibility, but the math and science needs some more direct instruction to be able to help students that may not have those basic skills, that foundation to be able to do more advanced mathematical operations.
Thank you. John, tell us about how instruction is being impacted at the higher education level.
Sure. So what does online education look like in higher ed? As I'm sure we're all aware, as doctoral students here at U of MD, it comes in a variety of different ways and in different formats. So maybe we'll just kind of level set a little bit on some terms. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how the online instruction looks in each one of those different ideologies that I mentioned in the opening. So online courses are those that are delivered completely on the internet. We're all familiar with them. They can be synchronous or asynchronous. There are, of course, hybrid courses that include online courses and the traditional face-to-face formats. Distance education is a term that is typically reserved for online degree granting programs. So you see distance education referred to as bachelor's programs, master's quite often programs. Not necessarily a single course, but an entire program is wrapped up into that umbrella term. And then e-learning is really anything that is electronically mediated or facilitated by software. So that's incredibly broad. So what does this look like in practice across those three different trends in development, program development, and higher ed? So social efficiency, what the research was showing was there was a lot of emphasis in practice placed on internships and field assessments with companies, given that the goal is to fill a need in the job force or the workforce. And it's objective driven, and a lot of the material can best be described as didactic or a video lecture, if you will. And success of those particular programs are measured by things like graduation outcomes and job placement data from graduates of those programs. Interestingly, relationships with companies is tracked in those particular programs, both at the instructor level and at the institutional level. How are you interfacing with companies as part of your duties in the program? And then graduate earnings and even employer feedback on graduates of your program was considered in these programs in higher education. And so for learner-centered, again, it's a little bit of the opposite. So this is where students take ownership of their learning and the courses that they're taking part in these particular programs. There's an emphasis placed on a lot of conversation across course participants through things like discussion boards and forums. There are collaborative projects using things like, using tools like Google Docs and so forth, where a lot of information can be exchanged in real time, because everything is based, again, on application and experiences of the students. So success metrics in those programs are things like classroom culture and the learning experience for the student or the participant in the course and in the program. Access, so how easily and when they can access material and work through what it is that they are to be learning. And then student diversity, so it was interesting to see quite a few institutions using online programs as a way to diversify their student body through that same access. And because the capitalistic ideology is so new for higher education or for creating online programs in higher education, there was actually little by comparison in terms of success outcomes of how these courses are being measured. And in a subsequent question here, we're going to get into a little more detail. But 53% of public four-year institutions and 64% of private four-year institutions are reporting data collected on their student achievement outcomes, which I found to be surprisingly low.
Excellent. As a kind of follow-up question, John, did you see anything in the literature that talks about MOOCs and instructional applications in those massive online offerings?
I did, and it closely aligned, what I found closely aligned with the capitalistic ideology, with this idea that MOOCs are an opportunity for institutions to build their brand, if you will. So, and for those of you that don't know what MOOCs are, they're massive open enrollment courses. And so institutions will create these and then make them free to anybody that wants to sign up and take them. So you don't have to be a degree-seeking student to take a MOOC course. You don't have to be enrolled. You can quite literally just log on and take courses at Harvard or University of Michigan or all these really prestigious universities. But they see it as a way to have their brand out in front and to some degree allow you to test the waters, if you will, with the idea that you would be a paying customer eventually as you enroll in the program.
Thank you.
And may I just add
Sure,
one thing
sure.
to that? So, and that's just not at the higher education level as well. So you're starting to see that at the secondary level, the use of MOOCs. For example, the Genesee Intermediate School District has just created one. And so you're going to now probably start to see it not just at higher ed, but you'll probably see that at the secondary level as well.
That's good to know, Tim. Thank you. Our next and last focus area is how online learning is impacting educational leadership, again at the elementary level, secondary level, and higher education level. Jerry?
Well, at the elementary level, first of all, we talk about certain leadership styles, and transformational leadership style is one that's very relevant for online learning. Transformational leadership basically tells us that we're dealing with teams. You're working with a group of teachers, trying to identify a need for a change, create a vision, and through inspiration and execution of change practices for online learning. These are some attributes of an established leader. As you can see on the screen, 6 ways to succeed as a leader. Number one, you have to be able to inspire those that are around you. And you recognize the achievements, you motivate employees or teachers for the work that they do. Leading employees, strategic planning plays a key point. Change management and employee development. When I look at employee development, I think about coaching and mentoring. And you're an instructional leader, so that's what you have to do, provide guidance for teachers to use that online piece in their classrooms. And self-awareness. Transformational leadership encompasses a multitude of things, but I think when we have our parents in our buildings, parents have access to technology, and they use like PowerSchool and portals and things, and try to guide parents to use that to check attendance and records and things of that nature. For the most part, professional development is a key point, and I think that teachers have to be ready to learn how to use the digital language and digital framework for providing instruction. A good quote that I pulled through my research was by Bill Gates. And number one, he said that technology is a tool, okay, in terms of getting the kids working together and motivating them. Teachers the most important key factor there. And I thought that was a great quote from him. That's what I think leadership has.
Thank you, Terry. Let me add a kind of emphasize a little more on the employee development and online learning. We are seeing more and more online professional development options are becoming available for teachers. And that's perhaps where leadership can play a role, providing professional development, particularly if you have limited resources at your building. So the online professional developments most likely will impact at any level, but perhaps elementary level, if we have a kind of leader that focusing on that particular the need that teachers can present. Thank you again. Secondary level, what's happening there?
Yeah, so at the secondary level, there's a pretty substantial impact on leadership. Going back to what I had referenced with Michigan's strategic plan, that top 10 in 10 years, goal 2 is regarding technology. And part of that goal, one of the subcategories in that goal is regarding school leader competencies as it relates to technology. So the state of Michigan is really focusing on that. So what that means is at the secondary level, secondary leaders need to revise their skill set. And so online learning and technology needs to be a major component of that skill set of the secondary leader. Some of the areas that need to be revised is transparency and accountability. So what technology has done is it has provided this level of transparency to students and to parents. So I'll give you a specific example. There is a platform called MyStar, and that is used by a number of different districts where there's a parent portal component to that. So where parents can log on and they can see teachers' comments, they can see grades, they can see attendance. And so as a former principal, I knew that I was going to be getting certain questions at the end of a quarter or in a marking period, and I had to be prepared for that. But I knew that was part of my skill set, knowing that online component, I've got parents that are now more informed and are going to be taking a look at what the teachers are entering. Another example of that was what they're not entering. So I knew if teachers were not keeping up with their grades, or if they had missed an attendance mark, and then I had to have those difficult conversations with teachers. So that's what I mean by the transparency and accountability. And you have students as well that are continually looking at their grades and going back to their teachers and asking questions and having conversations. But another part of it is the educational leader needs to be able to assess readiness and capacity of their school or of their district for bringing on online education and different programs. So there's a variety of different models. A lot of those models for assessing readiness and capacity that I read in different journals did not come from the field of education. It came from different areas of business. So just taking a look at an organization in general and assessing their readiness and capacity. And that also leads into having a shared online education vision. So that's another major component and impact on leadership at the secondary level.
I think that's really important, shared online education vision. I don't know if we are doing well on that front, but definitely we need to do better. John, higher education.
So I mentioned the capitalistic ideology was relatively new and young. So As you might imagine, it's actually created a new opportunity for leadership in this space. A lot of institutions recognize the importance of online education and appoint one individual for the institution to handle it, basically. Oftentimes they're referred to as COOs, or Chief Online Officers. They report into academic affairs, and they do things like everything related to online learning policies, faculty training, coordinating with other units, handle all of the instructional design, quality assurance budgeting, and so forth. So interesting there that it's an entire new field, if you will, of educational leadership wrapped up into online education. If you are a leader of an institution, you're seeing trends like the creation of a separate college or unit, if you will, fully dedicated to online education. You hear them referred to as virtual colleges or virtual universities. Central Michigan has one. This particular study called out the success of one at Cal State. And the umbrella program is really the brand for that online programming and online courses and online programming, where students actually enroll through that as an enrollment vehicle and then get into the programs rather than having them embedded into different departments that may offer similar programs in the traditional sense. Other implications for leadership, of course, there's this quality and evaluation piece that I kind of alluded to earlier. The U.S. Department of Education accredits different institutions for their existing programs, so the traditional programs and courses. And basically they say that if you're accredited to provide that education, you're accredited to provide your online education. And provides a lot of autonomy for the institutions to decide how that's going to be handled, delivered, and evaluated, and quality is tracked, which really creates a lot of challenges for any type of consistency across online programs from institution to institution. And you are seeing a table there of, in a review through the research, these are the most popular quality indicators used at different institutions, and there are 17 of them being used, which I found striking that there are so many, first of all. And second of all, I found that a large number of them are, I guess I would describe as institutional inputs, so things that the institution can control rather than related to student outcomes. So things like the faculty credentials, so the faculty that they're placing in these courses, cost of attendance, expenditures per student, student debt, loan repayment statistics. These are all things that not necessarily you would think are attributed to student outcomes and success of student learning within the programs, which I would have thought would have risen to the top is how online programs are being evaluated and tracked for quality.
Thank you, John. So given the fact that we covered these three critical pieces, curriculum, instruction, and leadership at three different levels of K-16 education, I would like to hear your overall conclusion. So what are you hearing? What are you drawing out of the conversation? What's your conclusion based on what we shared today? And I would like to start with Jerry again.
Well, from an elementary standpoint, I think that online learning, blended learning in K-12 education is very important. We must embrace all aspects of the learning for students' success and education. Our title is Balancing Bricks and Clicks. It has a place in education and in elementary. It's still limited at the elementary level. I think you've heard three perspectives. I think elementary is the beginning, the nurturing, and then it progresses on to secondary, then higher ed. Leadership still has a part involved with it. Three major components from the research that I've looked at, academic, cultural, and technical, are three key pieces that may need to be looked at. As far as academic, you want to make sure that we have courses that have integrity, a great design for online learning that can take place in an elementary school. Cultural, I think that teachers need need not be resistant to change, so you have to make sure you have buy-in, so that the culture or the environment that you have in your building, that everyone's on one accord and they can get involved with the blending. Technical, even though I'm in the urban area, there's limited access for some children to have online learning experiences, and the lack of connectivity and access can be a problem, as opposed to some other higher districts, they may have that access. So it needs to be an equitable part there. So what I would say that for me personally, as administrator in the building, I think it's a place for it. Online is a great thing, but also too, we need to continue to build on it.
This is what I'm hearing, Jerry, so correct me if I'm wrong. So your conclusion is that particularly at the elementary level,
Yes.
your position is that we need to find a balance of bricks and clicks.
Yes.
Elementary level is still an area that we are exploring possible options. Perhaps the age group and developmentally appropriate practices and etc. But give me these three again, because those are important. So then, at the elementary level, when we consider online teaching and learning, so we need to be careful about academics, cultural, and technical. Thank you very much.
So my recommendation at the secondary level is a more balanced or blended learning approach. I had mentioned that there's 4 kind of categories at the secondary level for online learning. So that blended model, the ratio of how much is face-to-face, how much would be online, I would think would change depending upon what the intended purpose is. So an example of that, going back to the credit recovery, my recommendation would be more face-to-face for credit recovery. For more supplemental or remediation or skills practice, I believe that ratio could be more online. So the balance, it wouldn't be necessarily a 50-50 balance. It would depend upon what the intended purpose of that online component is. Another recommendation would be to make sure that educational leaders do revise their skill set, are knowledgeable about what is the intended purpose of online education, and how it does provide different advantages, some disadvantages, and understanding that impact maybe by subject area. Because what I had mentioned is research does vary. The results of the research varies depending upon the subject area. It also depends upon middle school and high school. Research shows that there is not as much success at middle school level with online learning that there is as in high school. So educational leaders need to understand that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. John, your final comments?
So I'll give you a couple statistics here to lead into my point. Way back in the year 2000, 90% of public 2-year universities or colleges and 89% of public 4-year institutions were offering some form of distance education. And at that time, nearly 3 million students were enrolled in their programs. Fast forward to 2011, and that enrollment grew to 21 million, which is more than 18 million students from 2001 to 2011. So just imagine the growth now in 2019. So it's a trend that, to no surprise to everybody in this room, is going to continue to grow, and is definitely a critical function of higher education. And if you're asking the question of financial feasibility for online programming in these new fields of leadership and these separate colleges and academies that are managing all of this, for-profit programs, or the programs that are operating on the green side of things, outnumber those that are in the red 3-to-1 currently. And COOs, so the chief operating officers, when surveyed, will admit that they're charging a higher tuition rate for students in their online programming by comparison to the tuition paid by traditional students. So there's a financial model there that supports the online education in higher education. So yeah, I mean the question is I don't think the question is does online education belong in higher education? It's already here. It's going to be a critical piece to the future of higher ed. I think as Tim and Jerry have pointed out, it's really more about the balance of bricks and clicks, and I think I would tie it back to one of the points that Tim had made about institutional readiness and each institution being able to look at where they're at now and what they're able to execute on moving forward, and if they haven't gotten there yet, they're falling behind.
Thank you very much. I hope that we provided some perspectives on online learning at the elementary, secondary, and higher education level, and particularly its impact on curriculum, instruction, and educational leadership. It's now your turn. Any questions, comments, any further explanations to the current discussions? Yes, Dr. Chris.
So, John, I wanted to go back to your response to question 2, and there was, and I didn't get them down, so I don't remember them, but you were categorizing the different types of instruction that were taking place. What I'm wondering is, do you see there being kind of a dominant form of instruction, or is there one that is more common and one less common? And do you see that shifting over time?
So it has shifted, just like in the traditional sense, it has definitely shifted. So let me go back to number 2. The social efficiency theory was the predominant ideology, or that ideology was the predominant ideology for program development in the early 1900s, and then that shifted to a more learner-centered in the late 1900s. So I guess my answer to your question is in terms of online programming, I would say it would be tilted heavier towards the learner-centered environment versus the social efficiency environment, just based on where the trend in overall curriculum development was at the time, regardless of whether it was online or traditional.
So you see at universities, we are moving towards a more kind of learner-centered,
Learner-centered,
customized.
yeah, and there's definitely opportunities through use of different technologies to make it more customized to the learner and individualistic to the learner that would move the needle towards that learner-centered ideology.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for providing the great online education throughout the K-12 and 16 maybe. Yeah. I just wondering, it looks like we need really teachers' education, not only to be ready to teach online education, not only for a specific teacher, but generally. How do you think the teacher's education is ready to technology using? Is there any kind of against idea, especially the old teachers, or not a pre-service teacher, maybe young new teachers, they are familiar with tech savvy, but not old teachers. How does it going the teacher education in terms of the technological education?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to reference coaching and mentoring and providing professional development. I think that's a key point. If you have a senior staff, for example, and you mentioned younger teachers, some of them are tech savvy when they come in, and they can pair and partner and try to train and coach others to build their capacity up for teaching online curriculum and services. Maybe from a higher ed point of view, you probably have to look at the colleges. What's the training coming out of the universities for young teachers? I know there's a big push that we need teachers across the nation in K-12 education, but are there training? I don't know if there's enough ample training teaching online at the university. It's been years since I've come through an education program of that nature. we did have courses that we would take, but now it's so much, training with the technology. You just have to have it. I just think you just have to coach.
Yeah. My concern at the secondary level, based on my experience, is a very little professional development has been provided to teachers and to school leaders. The professional development has been focused on something else. It could be literacy, it could be numeracy, or something more procedural. But one of the things that I worked for one district that started to do cross-training, something that kind of Jerry hinted to with regards to if there was certain teachers that were more tech savvy, used particular platforms and so forth that were really good, and maybe something like Power School, right, which is a platform for grading and attendance. Then instead of doing a regular staff meeting, part of that staff meeting would be that teacher would provide some kind of internal professional development, so doing some cross-training. But one of my concerns is if you're taking a look at a district or a school's professional development plan, you don't see much regarding online learning. So that's a big concern of mine. So I'm hoping that that trend will change with maybe more awareness and more emphasis placed on online learning. And maybe we start with the cross-training and using the internal resources.
Great.
Well, and then from the higher ed perspective, that's part of the reason why you're seeing universities create these groups, these separate colleges or virtual schools and academies headed up by a COO and numbers of staff members that reach into the tens and hundreds sometimes of individuals like instructional designers that help existing faculty take what they've been teaching in the traditional sense and convert it into online programming. And then they'll offer things like financial incentives, so stipends, personal stipends to faculty to transfer their courses into online formats or grants. So there's a lot happening in that space, and faculty development is much needed and part of those the mission of those groups as they're being stood up.
Excellent point. John, particularly at the higher education level, I think one obstacle that we need to still work on it is the pedagogy of online teaching. We kind of tend to, not all the time, but in general, we tend to mimic what we are doing in the face-to-face classroom on the online environment, which doesn't create a great educational experience for students. Online teaching has its own pedagogy, strategies, and way of teaching. I think faculty needs to do a good degree of professional development on that front. At the K-12 level, because my research, at least early research, focused on technology and teacher education, what I can tell you that we started very slow, meaning like 20 years ago. The first reaction of the teacher preparation colleges were that let's offer a required course. And soon enough, we realized that offering a required technology course is really not creating technology proficient teachers. And then we moved into more integrated approaches, and there are multiple of them, like integrating technology into non-technology courses, faculty modeling, technology-infused field experiences type of integrated models came to our scene. Lately, what I'm seeing, particularly at the in-service teacher training end of it, is coaching. Like the math coaches reading, the coaches type of applications that has already been there. And now we are seeing teachers who have a great deal of technology experience kind of coaching other teachers in their own building and trying to provide professional development in that way. Otherwise, it's like one-time shots and 2 hours professional developments. Never work, and I don't think it's going to work. Great. Maybe last question. All right.
I don't have a question, but I just think, well, I don't know actually if it's another question, but like you just said with instruction, technology coaches, and I see that in my in my district. Like we have one technology coach, but it's like they'll email the staff and they'll say, if you're interested in a technology coach, email. So from the ed leadership kind of standpoint, as a future leader, I would like to see something as far as like, okay, testing maybe teacher technology like usage, or like how well, like maybe their proficiency with technology, and then having the principals maybe have those conversations with staff, like, you know, you need to sign up to see that technology coach, because we had the technology coach in our teachers lounge all year last year, and I feel bad because nobody would sign up to see
Is that at the district level, your technology coach?
Yes.
Coach?
Yes, and they would put the coach on like one feeder track, and that person would be in charge of
I think the best practices of technology coaches is really having a regular teacher, classroom teacher in a given building,
Right.
becoming your coach of the other colleagues, of
Right.
her or him. Rather than having one technology course for the entire district, I don't think that is the best practice.
Right.
And also, again, this was the old way of running the business of having specific technology teachers. We moved away from that understanding. I assume, and I hope that when we say technology coaches, those are regular classroom teachers, but well-versed with technology in their own grade level or subject area, and mentors others. Those are the technology coaches that I was trying to reference.
Right. It would be nice to see like maybe like some technology committees in school and having these teachers like train other teachers.
Yeah, you know, and there's not much focus either at the onboarding level as well. You know, when new teachers are coming in, you know, districts use different systems and so forth, and I haven't really seen much with regards to the onboarding. Assessing a new teacher coming into a district, their technology expertise, and if, you know, they may say that they know this particular platform or whatever, but there's really no like assessing of that. So I think that's something else that needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
All right.
I'm going to run over time. So, Tim, in your answer to the third question, you kind of said that you saw students being more likely to talk to teachers about their grades. And so it got me wondering, kind of, do you see this use of online teaching and the use of technology in education, is it promoting kind of more discussion about kind of, I was thinking about it in terms of compliance or quality, or thinking about it in terms of grades versus learning? Do you get more talk about learning and where kids are engaged in the topic?
Yeah, I think that students are becoming more engaged and taking more control of their learning, I've seen, because they have now access to their grades. They have access to seeing the comments of teachers, and different platforms like Moodle, which provides even more information. That now I think is engaging students more and then giving them a little bit more motivation to take more leadership and being more assertive with regards to their education, which is, I think, a really good thing. It's great.
And I also think that a key piece is students taking more academic ownership of their own learning. That is a big push in our district. More kids to take ownership of the learning. Teachers step back and let kids facilitate things and look at their grades, look at what they're learning in the classroom, talking with others, and just leading that instruction. So I think even from secondary level, it does happen in elementary, and they're trying to push that. So,
Yeah, and periodically I would get complaints from teachers that are really, they're like, students are all over me because I haven't graded this assignment in 3 days. That's good. I'm glad that they're asking about it.
Passionate.
That's right. So, because we had a policy, if you collected an assignment, you had 2 days, you had 48 hours to be able to grade that and put that into the grade book. If it was day 3, though, a lot of students Now, because they had access to that grade book, they were questioning the teacher. I think that's a good thing.
On your behalf, let me thank these panelists. A great job. I hope that they continue their research in this field, because there is so much to learn. Still, there is so much to learn. Thank you, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.